It's time for the District 4 Report, presented to you by Professor Diggs himself, only on PilotPointBearcats.com. Class begins now.
Almost live from our studios in Pilot Point, Texas. You are listening to the Pilot Point Bearcat Network featuring the District 4 3A report this week. I am the Professor Matt Diggs. Thank you for tuning in for another week, and thank you to our friends in Pilot Point who are fading me in and fading me out and playing all of our intro music and throwing Ric Flair drops in there. Woo! Whenever they can. And it is great to be with you this week for the first time we have a defined ending of the season of the District 4 3A report, and we will be back here next week for an overall view of District 4 3A. We'll talk about some of the teams we haven't talked about in a while, like Paradise and Peaster and Bowie and Boyd. We'll talk a little bit about our thoughts about realignment. We'll look at where everybody may be going. Are you going up? Are you going down? Will this district stay intact coming into the next realignment? And then we'll have Nolan on, and he will talk about the state championship game and his thoughts based on that. But we can't tell you if those will be good thoughts or bad thoughts quite yet. And I will give you a spoiler that we disagree on our pick. So maybe you know what that means, or maybe you will be surprised at what that means. But let's talk about last week's game before we get started. Then we will bring on our friend Nolan, Ruth, to talk about this week's game, and then I'll give you my take on this week's game. And this was really a game of two halves. I mean, Brock jumped out on Mount Vernon early. They got a pick six, 14-7 at the end of the first quarter. Mount Vernon went for it on fourth down and goal near their end zone and could not get it. Brock with just a demoralizing 95-yard, 97-yard drive to go to halftime up 21-7. And at this point, you're very high confidence about Brock. You just thought, oh, well, Brock is here. This is our state champion pick, and all is going well until Mount Vernon came out with some adjustments and changes in the second half and completely took momentum away from Brock. Big plays, fourth downs, they started going for it, onside kicks. Everything went Mount Vernon's way, and there was a period in the fourth quarter where they're up, 28-21, and going to look to go up to two scores, where you just think to yourself, Mount Vernon has figured it out, and they have. They got it. They're going to win this game, and just two incredibly heartbreaking special teams errors by Mount Vernon, and I'm sure Coach Mathis might have a different opinion than me, but I would consider them unforced errors. I don't think it was any sort of block or pressure that Brock was getting. He might say it was the threat of pressure that disrupted the snap count. But again, I haven't followed Mount Vernon all year to know these things, but I know their kicker had a great leg, and the Brock radio broadcast said in pregame he was kicking them pretty consistently off a tee from 45 yards. So both of the field goals were very makeable for Mount Vernon, and they didn't even get an opportunity to try either of those plays, which sent the game to overtime. In overtime, give all the credit to Brock because they probably had one of the single best play calls I have seen in high school football in a long time. And it's not a unique play, but it is very Philly special-ish that they practiced. They clearly practiced it. They clearly knew how to execute it, and they used it at the right time. 4th and 3. Brock's ball in overtime. They have the ball first. You have Nathan Jones coming in at center, and even, I was watching the game on TV. The radio announcers didn't notice it, didn't see it coming, and then all of a sudden after that snap, because of high school rules, you could just see it on the replay. Ward Fizzold from Inside High School Sports with great film. You just saw him snap it. The ball went the completely opposite way. The momentum and the rollout went the opposite way. They went right. Nathan Jones went left. He was wide open. There was nobody there. They just had to throw it. And watching this ball, it was like the most beautiful duck. It was a rainbow pass, and he was there. He executed it. He caught caught it. And that wouldn't be the end of the game right there, because Mount Vernon had its opportunity. But at that point, you just kind of knew that Mount Vernon had their opportunity, and they lost it. Interception in the end zone to end the game. 35-28, Brock beating Mount Vernon. And when you look at this, and you look at basically every measurable metric in this game, Mount Vernon was a better team than Brock. Mount Vernon did all of this with 3 turnovers to Brock's 2 turnovers. They out-yarded them in the game, thanks to our friends at Digital Scout and all the Brock people who have all of their stats always up to date. But per play average, Mount Vernon was averaging about 6 yards a play. Brock was only averaging about 5 yards a play. Brock did have more time of possession. They ran the ball just a little bit better. Brock 42 carries for 172 yards. Mount Vernon 46 for 140. And that was really even a misnomer, because there was a couple of Braden Bennett runs late that got them up to that. He had 21 carries for 104 yards and 2 touchdowns to get Mount Vernon's offense going. Passing yards was 272 to 201, and just the better quarterback, Braden Bennett, outplayed Tyler Moody in this game. The running back situation, Braden Bennett was better than Cutter Wilson today. And Cutter Wilson, well, not today, but last week. And Cutter Wilson is a little bit banged up. We don't know his status going into the final game, but he still averaged 3.5 yards of carry, very gritty yards. Brett Tutter, again, just doing great things for Brock in relief, and they did just enough. And really, Nathan Jones, that last play was fantastic. And then you have a player like Eli Potts, who was the star. If you had him on your fantasy football team, you were very happy. 12 receptions for 127 yards. No real big plays, no big chunk plays, but anytime you needed a third down conversion, anytime you had a rollout, you had Eli Potts there who could catch the ball sure-handed. I don't remember in my time watching the game that he had any drops. Not to say he didn't, but my memory was he played just about a perfect game. And then Nathan Jones, 3 for 33 with a touchdown. Whenever they needed him, big play, you knew it was going to him. In fact, I said on Twitter right before that 4th down play, I didn't call that play, but I thought you're going to get a rollout, and I thought you were going to get a jump ball situation, Nathan Jones, but it was opposite of the momentum, but it wasn't a jump ball because the play call was so beautiful. It was wide open, and it was well designed to where they didn't need a jump ball. So Brock survives over Mount Vernon, 35-28, and they will take on the Lorena Leopards. And for a little bit about what happened last week from the Parker County perspective, and a little bit about what is to come, when we come back after I breathe and hit stop and re-record, and our friends in Pilot Point do whatever they're going to do in between our segments, we'll have Nolan Ruth on the District 4 3A report, brought to you by me at Professor Diggs on Twitter and our friends at the Pilot Point Bearcat Network.
Rudolph the red-nosed reindeer. What? Had a very shiny nose. What? And if you never saw it, what? You would even say it glows. What? Oh, yeah, hold it, you throw some of them.
We are back here at the District 4 3A report, and it would not be a state championship edition of the District 4 3A report without a state champion. Our friend Nolan Ruth is here with us one more week. How are you doing, sir?
Man, I'm doing great. I got to tell you something real quick off the top of this segment. I had someone come by my office this morning and drop off about $200 worth of Brockware after I tweeted last week that I needed some swag from the people of Brock, and they came through. So I'm joining you today wearing my Brock polo and my new Brock hat. So how about that? Roll Brock.
That is impressive. I know when I got my Plano East onesie, the wrestling onesie, I wear it to sleep every night and keeps me comforted. But I don't know, Nolan, you were there last week. I just watched it on TV, and I know one of your endearing qualities and things that Parker County loves about you is your unfailing Parker County optimism. I think you even almost come to grips with the Alito loss by now with your optimism. But last week, I did not like what I saw from Brock. Can you spin that in a way where I can reflect on that game, other than the grit which was there to come back, but they shouldn't have won that game, Nolan.
Well, to me, the way that it was best put was the way that the great Sarah Merrifield said on Bally Sports Southwest on high school scoreboard, was that the pendulum of momentum, when it swung in a big way. And I thought at halftime, right before the half ended, Brock had a 97-yard, 18-play, 8.5-minute drive. And I thought that was it. I thought that was it right in that moment. Then Mount Vernon comes out, and they immediately took momentum. They score a quick touchdown. They stop Brock defensively. They score again. They get an onside kick, and they score again. It just seemed like the Purple Tigers were unstoppable that third quarter. But I will say, it's what I went back to last week. This is a coaching staff. Billy Mathis is the head coach, the great defensive mind he is, and Blake Christensen, the offensive coordinator, the great offensive mind he is. They never feared, and I kind of got that feeling in those quotes from the players at the end of the game. Nathan Jones, especially, who's a very well outspoken young man. They never feared. They were all in their minds. They were always in it. They were never out of it. They did not get stunned by the momentum swings, and I think that's what ended up ultimately giving them the win, especially there in overtime, when you never know what's going to happen. Should they have won that game? Based on that third quarter, probably not. But again, it takes 4 quarters to win a football game, and that's what that coaching staff was telling those kids. Is they said, "Hey, this is the fourth quarter. This is when the game is won. This is when this is the situation that produces heroes." We got a couple good heroes there out of obviously the outstanding Elijah Potts, who tied the game up there with that late touchdown, and then Tyler Moody to Nathan Jones for the go-ahead touchdown overtime, and Carson Finney coming up with the game-winning pick. They were never out of it in their minds. It's very easy from the media perspective that we have to say they probably shouldn't have won that game, but in their minds, they were never out.
Now, 4th and 3 or 4th and goal, overtime. You're watching that play. What, as a football person, were you thinking? Because that was such a genius play call. I don't even think we could have played Madden and come up with a better play call. I don't even know if Madden can do what they did without some major modifications going on. So what were you thinking going into that pivotal play that gave them the win?
I was thinking, oh my gosh, this cannot happen to me twice. Obviously, during the Alito Sock game, I was, shaking the entire time. I did not want to see my Bearcats go down, and they ultimately went down. So that's what I was thinking. I was thinking, dear God, don't let this happen to me twice. But, it's like I just said, that's the beauty of the play calling that Blake Christensen has, and he knows the strength that his offense had. And I thought it was a pretty gutsy call. Obviously I saw them send the field goal unit out there for a half a second, and then they didn't. That's just the way we do things out here in Parker County. That's the way that Christensen and Mathis did things at Alito. That's the mentality and the new kind of way they're bringing to Brock. I know they brought that to Weatherford for the extent that they were there as well. We don't want to play for a tie. We don't want to play for, putting ourselves in a bad position. We want to, at our own risk and at our own peril, try to go that extra mile to get that extra play, to get those extra points. They didn't want to settle for 3. They wanted the 6 or the 7. That's what they wanted. And I'll tell you, that wasn't even the most shocking thing to me. The most shocking thing was in that overtime period that Brock had a 3rd and goal, and they did not have their play call ready. There was 6 seconds left on the play clock, and they weren't ready. And Mount Vernon ended up calling the timeout. And I don't understand what happened there. I may never know what happened there. But to me, that ended up costing Mount Vernon the game, because they gave Brock a little bit of extra scheming time, a little bit of time to prepare for what they wanted to do. And ultimately, I think that gave them the time to think about what they wanted to do on that 4th and goal when they threw the center pass to Nathan Jones. It just goes to great coaching. And and of course, like I mentioned, they were about to get a delay of game. They almost mismanaged it, but it broke their way, and that is ultimately what won them the game. And I'm not one to question the decisions made by those coaches, and especially since it worked. But that's just the way that we do it in Parker County. We want to take risks, especially when that goal is a state championship, and that's what they did, and now they're here.
Week 17 of the football season. Go back 3 weeks for two-a-days and all that. We've had 20 weeks of Brock practices. Other than the psychology stuff, which, the never give up and that side of things, what aspects of the game do you think the coaches are working on in practice this week that they need to get better at to beat a Lorena Leopards team?
Defense. Absolutely defense. It's been said this entire week since Brock beat Mount Vernon to today and until that game kicks off is defense. These are the two highest scoring offenses in 3A Division I, Brock being number 1, Lorena being number 2. The Eagles have got to come up with that big defensive stop, whether it be early or it be late, preferably late, but regardless, you need to come up with the stops. And to me, I look at Reed Watkins. He leads the team in interceptions. He's always making the big defensive plays. He was the one who had the rip 6 against Mount Vernon to put Brock up 14-7. He made that big early play. And without that play, I'm not sure Brock is even here this week. So they need to absolutely focus on that. And with their big defensive line, they can absolutely get the push and try to get pressure on this Lorena offense. I mean, it's going to be a high flying game, and you need to put pressure on them to try to get them flustered, try to get them to get off their game a little bit, not allow them to do what they want to do, much like Mount Vernon did to Brock this past week. I think the Eagles need to flip the script here, get Lorena off their game so they can't do what they want to do. And the way to do that is defense. If you stop that offense, absolutely, the Eagles are going to win this game.
Now, functionally, one thing that I was really shocked by in watching that game and having seen a couple of Brock games and following them was the first time, especially up the middle in the second half. I don't know if it was an adjustment or Brock getting tired, but Mount Vernon won the battle of their defensive line against the Brock offensive line in that second half specifically, where almost every big play Brock they had to roll out. It was some sort of rollout because when they tried to go up the middle, it just wasn't there. And Lorena arguably has a better defensive line and now has a bit of a game plan. Is there an adjustment that they can even make offensively when it comes to that? Or are they just going to have to try to scheme around that? Like, have they been exposed?
Well, I honestly think that, that's the one thing that Brock has that teams focus on is that running game. With Cutter Wilson and then Brett Tutter as well, the sophomore that has stepped up in such a big way. They like to run the ball. They can throw the ball, absolutely, but they like to run the ball. And that's when you saw, and that's why I think it was an adjustment against Mount Vernon. I think that Mount Vernon made the adjustment to stop the running game, kind of stop that long drive. Remember, like I said, that last drive before half for Brock was an 18-play, 97-yard drive. And you just can't let that happen. And most of those plays were runs. But at the same time, Tyler Moody is a good enough passer to where he can hit Nathan Jones. He can hit Elijah Potts. He can make those plays and make the stuff happen to do so. So when they focus too much on that middle run, much like Mount Vernon did in the fourth quarter and in overtime last week, they're not going to go there. They gave the ball up the middle a couple times, got a few yards out of it, and then they looked to the throwback to win the game in overtime. And then not even just that, they looked to the jet sweep with Elijah Potts to tie it up in the fourth quarter. I think that was an adjustment thing, but I think that is absolutely something that Lorena can be preparing for to try to stop this Brock offense, and slow them down. At the same time, though, I think Brock has the tools needed to counteract that and to get it done through the air. The biggest thing for me is that the Brock offensive line has to be able to allow Moody some time to set and throw the ball. He needs to work through his progressions. And there are a lot of passing plays that he really doesn't have progressions. He's told it's going to Nathan Jones no matter what. It's going to Elijah Potts no matter what. But if you buy him that extra time, he can work through that progression to where on a play where it's supposed to go to Potts, maybe he finds Nathan Jones on the backside on a hitch route or something. To me, that's the big thing. Mount Vernon made the right adjustment. I think Lorena is preparing for that. So for me, Brock should be preparing offensively for being ready to throw the ball a lot more than they were comfortable with. But at the same time, look, we don't know the status of Cutter Wilson because he was pretty banged up at the end of that game. But then you got Brett Tutter at the same time. So you never really know what you're going to come into. But for me, I think Brock needs to have it in their back pocket to where they can rely on that passing game a little more. And I think that they'll be well prepared to do that.
In watching a little bit of tape of Lorena this past week and what they did to Lago Vista, and again, it's a sample size of one. So if we have a Lorena coach coming on here and that's completely wrong. It's a sample size of one. I admit that. But they really reminded me of, in that game and in the highlights I saw, kind of like Whitesboro, except maybe a little bit better, especially on the offensive and defensive line, how it's big chunk plays and run. Do you think if Brock sees that's going to be a little bit of a comfort level for them, or do you think they're going to just be preparing for anything, state championship throughout the game plan and just play your best?
That's an interesting question, and much to your point, this Leopards team does look like Whitesboro quite a bit, and I think that Brock has the experience not only playing them once but playing them twice this year to kind of know what's going to happen. And you are right; they are better than Whitesboro by light years. This should be a very, very interesting game. And, Brock's lowest point spread against Whitesboro was 21 points this year. So I'm thinking this is going to be a less than 21 points game. I'm thinking this is going to be a less than 14 points game. But to answer your question, I think the key for the defense is to get that extra push and extra pressure. Don't let them get that big play. And that's where Reed Watkins is going to step in. Carson Finney needs to step up. Jet Jones is kind of an under the radar name, and I know I kind of have a sentimental feel for him because I know him personally. But if he gets in this game, look for him to make a play because he's that kind of guy, and he'll be ready. But he needs to do that as well. And so I'm focusing. If I'm Billy Mathis defensively, I'm focusing on taking away that high flying game, right? Because if you make them run, if they have a 3rd and 6 and you make them run it, Brock is more often than not going to stop him on that 3rd down and force Lorena to punt. So to me, the big plays need to be eliminated. And we saw a number of them that Mount Vernon converted this past week. And if I'm the coach of Lorena, I'm pinpointing that. I'm circling those plays and saying we need to be able to make those big plays. So I think that's one big thing they need to fix defensively. I think they'll be able to do it. But they definitely, without a doubt, need their secondary to step up and make those plays when it's called upon.
Yeah, the execution, and we'll be talking about this in the next segment when I go solo. Looking at the execution, obviously Mount Vernon did great on 3rd down when they had to, those high-stress situations. Lorena is not the team that wants to be like that. They want to be ahead of the chains. They want their big chunk plays on 1st and 2nd down when you're expecting them to maybe run the ball for 7-8, and you're loading up, and then they do a little play action misdirection on you and get the big pops. And I think Whitesboro, when they were really good week 9 to about week 13, they were expert at doing that as well until Brock was able to slow them down. But we're going to hand you the microphone, Nolan, for the last question, and just give us your final thoughts and your final prediction if you've given a point spread a thought. I'm pretty sure who you're going to pick, but kind of your final score and thoughts to that end.
I'm not gutsy enough to make a final score prediction in a state championship. I'll do it in any other playoff round. I'll do it in a regular season game, but I'm not gutsy enough to do it in a state championship game. I will say that the projection that Jerry Forrest at Pigskin Prep and the team at Dave Campbell's has put out is Brock by 3. And I tend to take the over on that one. I would absolutely take that. I think Brock will have the offensive power, not really the power, but more, it's just the more methodical drives, the ability to control the clock, much like they did against Mount Vernon, even when their backs were up against the wall there towards the end. And they're not going to let that Leopards offense on the field. And when the Leopards offense is on the field, then the Eagles defense is going to be well rested, and they might give up a couple big plays. They might give up a couple touchdowns. That's just how football works. And especially state championship football. But ultimately, to me, the big thing that comes down to it is who can play the cleanest game offensively. And I think Brock is going to be the one to play the cleanest game offensively, because the defense is so good at creating turnovers. They're so good at getting pressure on the quarterback, and especially stopping it up the middle. That is what this comes down to. And if the offense comes out and does their job, if the offensive line gives Moody enough time, if whoever is playing running back can just get 3 yards a carry, if their passing percentage is over 50%, I think Brock's going to win this game by at least 10. That's the one I give it to. And this is, in my opinion, the best team in high school football at the 3A level. I mean, I would be willing, whoever wins in Division II between Gunner and Franklin, I would love to see Brock take that team on. I think this is the best all-around team in 3A, and they've shown that. And especially when they are motivated, like they were against Jim Ned, like they were against Mount Vernon this past week. I was not able to hear what Billy Mathis said to that team before the game or at halftime, like I was during the Whitesboro playoff game. But just that motivating factor. This is a team that when they're motivated, they go out and do well. And I don't think the big stage is going to scare them at all, especially because, they've played on a bigger stage than Lorena has played on all year. 2 weeks ago, they're playing at the Rangers ballpark, which is, smaller than AT&T Stadium, but still has that kind of that big game feel, that big stadium feel. I don't think they're going to be intimidated by that. I think they're going to come out, they're going to play Brock football. And I'm looking forward to the Eagles bringing home a state championship to Parker County.
And is it going to impact our relationship, Nolan? I'm taking Lorena, or are you going to be able to forgive me?
Well, both you and Brennan McAuliffe took Jim Ned, so it just depends on how the game goes, and then we'll talk after that.
Nolan Ruth, thank you for joining us. You can see him at Twitter at Real Nolan Ruth. The community news in Aledo doing great things. Thank you for the godfather of Parker County. Got to get your moniker out there. Thank you for coming on one more time and giving us the state championship preview of your Brock Eagles.
Hey, of course, man. And one more thing, just so you know, I put on this Brock polo and Brock hat after it was brought to my office, and I came back to Aledo for dinner tonight after my original plans tonight were canceled, and I got a mixed reaction. I got some cheers because a lot of people are rooting for Billy Mathis, but I also got some jeers as well, saying I'm a traitor. But I hope that all the people of Parker County will be out there Thursday supporting Brock, because this is our team. This is the team that we have representing us in the state championship, and I hope the teams of 4-3A feel the same as well.
And Aledo fans, Nolan has not gone Olivia Rodrigo on you. He is not a traitor.
Diggs, I appreciate you having me, brother.
Man, I love that guy. We are blessed to have Nolan come on and talk with us and give us his insight as somebody who has won a state championship, has played the game, but who's unabashedly and unapologetically on that Brock bandwagon and loves Parker County. So you get both elements of his football knowledge and his football passion in his package. For lack of a better term, you might have to dump that because I talked about his package. I'm sure he's not going to like me doing that. But his total package, Nolan Ruth, thank you for coming on. And I'm going to give you my feedback as we end our District 4-3A report, the penultimate episode. Penultimate is one of those words that sounds fancier than it is. If you don't know what penultimate is, it's second to last. Or as they say in Australia, second last. You don't have to say second to last. You just say second last. Out there in Australia. I know that because I watch Australian reality television every now and then, but that's a different podcast. We could talk about that at a different time. Let's talk about Lorena and Brock, and I'm taking Lorena in this game. I will go ahead and say that because I feel like Brock has been exposed. I feel the second half adjustments of what Mount Vernon did, where they said, okay, we're going to load the box, we're going to overload your front set, and we're basically going to say you have to beat us passing. And yes, you're going to have Eli Potts get his and Nathan Jones get his, and that's fine. If you can get the ball off, you can have those plays, but you're not going to get 10 yards of play against us running the ball. You're not going to get the big run. We're going to use our interior defense. We're going to overwhelm your offensive line. We're going to collapse, and we're going to have numbers, and we're going to give you that offensive. We're going to give you the passing game. And it worked beautifully. And Brock looked like they had never seen this before, and they probably hadn't, as far as I'm sure some teams have tried to scheme similar things against them, but they just didn't have the athletes to do it. And Mount Vernon is not a team that's known for its defensive prowess. When you look at them throughout the year, they're offensive minded. This is Art Briles' team, and obviously it's got Coach Willard's fingerprints on it now, which has got a little bit more of a defensive tint to it. But still, they're not a team that's going to have 4 players on the state all-defense team. It's a team that's known for its offensive firepower. And when I look at Lorena, and I will tell you, I do not cover Lorena. I'm just a neutral observer. So if somebody is a Lorena expert listening to this podcast wanting expertise from Lorena football, I am giving you a sample size of one game. And that is Lago Vista and what I see in some box scores. And other than the little bit of tape I've seen, it's not much. So I get it. It's not going to be as strong as my Brock or seeing Whitesboro in person. But when I see Lorena, I see a lot of Whitesboro. And I see just the offensive philosophy. You've got a quarterback who, if he only throws it for 13, 14 times, they're winning the game by 5 touchdowns. And of those plays, he might only complete half of them, but he's going to have a 20-yard average and a couple of big touchdowns. That's very much what Whitesboro did, and that's what Lorena wants to do. But where I think Lorena is a little bit better is being able to rush the ball. Maybe Whitesboro, before their running back went down, they might have been able to execute that a little bit more. But for Lorena, they got Ryan Abel, the quarterback, who is able, like Matt Hermes, to get the ball out and throw the ball downfield with good accuracy. Rhett Hansen running the ball is going to average 10 to 12 yards of play, and he's going to get the big chunks. He got 4 touchdowns on 16 carries, 215 yards. And then they have, a cadre of 4 or 5 other players who can run the ball. Reed Michna, who had 12 carries for 114 yards as a change of pace back. And then just another 3 or 4 running backs who can come in garbage time, full backs who can come in and take care of business. And then on the receiving side of the ball, they got some big threats like Jaden Porter, the sophomore. Very much sounds like Whitesboro, who goes 3 for 67, 62 of that in one play, big play for a touchdown. Michael Moore, 3 for 47, and Key Ritchie, 2 for 21, and a touchdown. This is not a team that's going to throw the ball 80 times, but if they need to throw 40 or 50 times in a game, they have that ability. If you look at their box score against Franklin in that game, they found success throwing the ball, and they were able to do it. They are multi-dimensional. If you want to load up against the run, they can beat you with the pass. If you want to load up against the pass, they can beat you with the run. And you might be thinking to yourself, well, you just gave this formula for Brock of how to beat them: slow down the run, force them to beat you with the pass. And although that's true, they haven't shown that they can do that because they haven't needed to. And Lorena has played 2 teams that are going to be playing in the state finals in China Spring and in Franklin, where they've shown success doing that against the state's best. You could arguably say that Franklin is the best team in 3A, and China Spring certainly has a case as one of the best teams in 4A, and they've already played those teams to 1-score games and shown success in doing that both offensively and defensively. Lorena is a little turnover prone. I think if Brock ends up winning this game, we're going to look back at the turnover battle and go, okay, well, that's where it got lost for Lorena. But I think if this is a relatively clean game, maybe one mistake, -1 turnovers for Lorena, I think Lorena will win this game by 2 scores because I think the defensive game plan on how to slow down Brock has been laid out there, and Lorena has the athletes to do it. And because they have the athletes to do it, and they have the offensive firepower to score on Brock, because Brock is not a shutdown defense by any means. I think that Lorena defensively versus Brock defensively, Lorena's a little bit better, but Brock is a little bit better offensively. But you have to look at the gap between those two things, and I think the gap between those two things is going to skew toward Lorena. And as long as Lorena can execute on special teams, which Mount Vernon could not do, I think your Lorena Leopards will be the 3A Division I state champions. And that hurts me as somebody who loves talking District 4 3A football. I would love to bring a banner home. I don't think they're going to give me a banner now, but you have to give the show a banner because we've had Nolan on it, right? Nolan talked about all this free swag that he got. But next week, we'll see who is right. Was Nolan right or was I right? And we'll talk a little bit about what 2022 will look like. So go ahead and fire up our music for our friends in Pilot Point, for Pilot Point Bearcat Network, for Coach Marsh, the world's greatest assistant coach. Love seeing his stuff out there. For the old coach who lets me do this, and for all of our friends who listen each and every week, I am Matt Diggs, the professor, at Professor Diggs on Twitter. We will see you next week here on the District 4 3A Report.